The air hung thick with the scent of lilies and unspoken grief. The mahogany casket gleamed under the dim light of the funeral home, reflecting the tear-streaked faces of the mourners. I could feel the weight of their stares, a suffocating blanket of pity and veiled curiosity. They watched me, the granddaughter, the last direct descendant, as if I held the answers to questions they dared not ask. But all I held was a hollow ache in my chest, and the chilling premonition that this day marked not an ending, but a sinister beginning. If you truly cherish the memory of your family, subscribe now. My grandmother Evelyn was a force of nature, a matriarch who commanded respect and radiated warmth. She built her empire from nothing, a testament to her grit and unwavering determination. I, Lucy, was her protégée, the one she groomed to inherit it all. She taught me the intricacies of business, the importance of loyalty, and the art of reading people, or so I thought. The lawyer, a weasel-faced man named Mr. Harding, approached me after the service, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "Miss Mallory," he whispered, his voice raspy, "I need to speak with you privately. It's about your grandmother's will. It's complicated." He gestured towards a side exit, a shadowy doorway that seemed to exhale a breath of cold dread. I hesitated. The air around him felt tainted, heavy with secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to know, but Evelyn always said, "Trust no one but listen to everyone." So, with a deep breath, I followed him. He led me down a narrow corridor, the silence amplifying the echo of our footsteps. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper. We stopped before a heavy oak door, its surface scarred and weathered. Harding fumbled with the lock, his hands trembling slightly. "Are you ready for this, Miss Mallory?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "Ready for what?" He didn't answer but instead pushed the door open, revealing a dimly lit room. And that's when I saw them. My uncle, my aunt, my boyfriend, all gathered around a table littered with documents, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of a single lamp. Each of them wore the same chilling expression, a mixture of greed and triumph, a betrayal so profound it stole the very air from my lungs. The person I trusted most was one of them. The tableau before me was a grotesque parody of a family gathering. My uncle, a man who'd always reeked of desperation and cheap cologne, puffed out his chest like he'd finally won something. My aunt, whose smile never quite reached her eyes, wore a mask of smug satisfaction. And Liam, my boyfriend of 3 years, the man I'd envisioned building a life with, stood beside them, his gaze averted, a faint blush creeping up his neck. The document spread across the table bore Evelyn's signature, or rather, a sloppy imitation of it. "What is this?" I managed to choke out, my voice trembling. Mr. Harding cleared his throat nervously. "Miss Mallory," he began, "your grandmother's will, it's been amended. All assets, the company, the estate, everything is to be divided equally among your uncle, your aunt, and Liam." The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, my hand instinctively flying to my chest. It felt as though my heart was trying to claw its way out of my ribcage. Liam finally looked up, his eyes filled with something I couldn't decipher, guilt, pity, or something far more sinister. "Lucy, we can explain," he stammered, taking a tentative step towards me. I raised my hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Explain what, Liam? Explain how you conspired with my family to rob me of everything my grandmother worked for. Explain how you betrayed me, not just as her heir but as a human being." My voice rose with each word, the shock slowly giving way to a white-hot rage. The following weeks were a blur of legal battles, whispered insults, and escalating paranoia. My uncle and aunt, emboldened by their newfound wealth, wasted no time in dismantling Evelyn's empire. They sold off assets, fired loyal employees, and replaced them with their own cronies. The company, once a symbol of innovation and integrity, was rapidly devolving into a soulless husk. Liam, ever the coward, remained on the periphery, sending me hollow apologies and pleading for understanding. But his words were empty, devoid of sincerity. He was a puppet, dancing to the tune of my scheming relatives. I tried to fight back, armed with my grandmother's teachings and my own unwavering determination. I challenged the amended will, hired my own lawyers, and rallied the remaining loyalists within the company. But the odds were stacked against me. My uncle and aunt had anticipated my every move, their legal team more ruthless and better funded than mine. Each day brought a fresh wave of setbacks, closed doors, sabotage deals, and increasingly hostile encounters. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. My nights were haunted by visions of Evelyn's disappointed face, and the gnawing fear that I was failing her legacy. I lost weight, my skin grew pale, and dark circles formed under my eyes. I was isolated, alone, and drowning in a sea of despair. One particularly brutal day, I received a call from my lawyer, his voice grim. "Lucy," he said, "I'm afraid I have some bad news. The judge has ruled in favor of your uncle and aunt. The amended will stands." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I'm sorry, Lucy, there's nothing more I can do." The news hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just the loss of the company, the estate, the inheritance. It was the finality of it all, the crushing realization that I had been outmaneuvered, outgunned, and utterly defeated. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights blurring through my tear-filled eyes. I felt a darkness creeping into my soul, a despair so profound it threatened to consume me whole. I thought about Evelyn, her strength, her resilience, her unwavering belief in me, and I knew in that moment that I couldn't give up. I wouldn't let them win. I would find a way to reclaim what was rightfully mine, to avenge my grandmother's memory, and to make them pay for their betrayal. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but I was no longer afraid. I had nothing left to lose. They thought they had broken me, that I was defeated. But they were wrong. This was just the beginning. The following weeks bled into one another, a monotonous cycle of despair and dwindling hope. My apartment, once a sanctuary filled with Evelyn's vibrant art and comforting aromas, now felt like a prison. I couldn't bring myself to leave, haunted by the thought of facing the smug faces of my betrayers. Food lost its taste, sleep offered no respite, and the silence in the apartment was deafening, broken only by the occasional sob that racked my body. I replayed every conversation with Evelyn, every piece of advice she had ever given me, searching for some hidden clue, some secret strategy that I had overlooked. But all I found were memories, sharp and poignant, that served only to deepen my pain. Liam's calls became more frequent, his voice laced with increasing desperation. He begged me to meet him, to talk, to understand. But I refused. I couldn't bear to see his face, to hear his lies. He had made his choice, and now he had to live with the consequences. One evening, as I sat staring blankly at the television screen, a news report flashed across the screen. It was a story about my uncle and aunt, celebrating their recent acquisition of a prestigious award for business innovation. They stood beaming, bathed in the glow of flashing cameras, their faces radiating false sincerity. I felt a surge of nausea rise within me, a mixture of anger and disgust. The glass in my hand shattered, sending shards of glass and crimson liquid scattering across the floor. That was it. That was the breaking point. As I knelt there, amidst the broken glass and spilled liquid, a profound shift occurred within me. The despair began to recede, replaced by a cold, unwavering resolve. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I was done wallowing in self-pity. I was done being a victim. They had taken everything from me, but they hadn't taken my spirit. They had underestimated my strength, my determination, my capacity for retribution. A plan began to formulate in my mind, a complex and intricate web of deception and manipulation. It would be a long and arduous process, fraught with risk, but I was prepared to do whatever it took to reclaim what was rightfully mine and to make them pay for their treachery. The first step was to gather information. I needed to know everything about their operations, their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities. I needed to understand their motivations, their fears, their deepest secrets. And to do that, I needed to get close to them, to infiltrate their inner circle. It would require me to swallow my pride, to mask my true feelings, to play a role that was utterly antithetical to my nature. But I was willing to do it. I had to do it. Evelyn would have expected nothing less. The next morning, I forced myself to get out of bed, to shower, to dress in clothes that didn't reek of despair. I stared at my reflection in the mirror, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed woman staring back at me. But beneath the surface, I could see a flicker of something new, something dangerous. I spent the day researching my uncle and aunt's activities, scouring the internet for any information I could find. I dug into their past, their business dealings, their personal lives. I discovered a trail of shady transactions, hidden debts, and disgruntled former employees. The more I learned, the more my resolve hardened. They were not the invincible masterminds they portrayed themselves to be. They were flawed, vulnerable, and deeply corrupt, and I was going to expose them. That evening I made a phone call. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. I dialed Liam's number, my hand trembling. He answered on the first ring, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. "Lucy?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Liam," I said, my voice cold and devoid of emotion, "I want to meet you." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Really?" he finally stammered. "Yes," I said, "but on my terms." I laid out my conditions, my demands. He listened without interrupting, his silence punctuated only by the occasional nervous gulp. When I was finished, he hesitated for a moment. Okay, he said finally. Okay, Lucy, whatever you want. I hung up the phone, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. The game had begun. They thought they had won. They thought I was defeated. But they were about to learn that revenge is a dish best served cold. And I was about to become the coldest person they had ever met. I met Liam at a secluded cafe on the outskirts of town, a place where we used to spend hours talking about our dreams. Now, the air between us was thick with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. He looked tired, his eyes shadowed, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a nervous uncertainty. He launched into a prepared speech, a litany of apologies and justifications, but I cut him off. Save it, Liam, I said, my voice flat. I'm not here for apologies, I'm here for information. I laid out my proposition, a deal with the devil, so to speak. I knew he was their weak link, riddled with guilt and desperate for redemption. I offered him a chance to make amends, to help me expose their treachery. In exchange, I promised to consider his role in everything when the dust settled. It was a gamble, trusting him again, but I had no other choice. He hesitated, his eyes darting nervously around the cafe. What do you want me to do? He finally asked, his voice barely audible. Tell me everything, I said. Everything about their plans, their finances, their secrets, everything. He spent the next few hours spilling his guts, revealing the intricate web of lies and deceit they had constructed. He told me about the forged documents, the hidden accounts, the backroom deals. He confirmed my suspicions about their corruption, their greed, and their willingness to stop at nothing to maintain their ill-gotten gains. He even revealed their next target, a rival company they planned to sabotage in order to eliminate the competition. As he spoke, I surreptitiously recorded our conversation on my phone, gathering evidence that would later prove invaluable. I smiled. I acted broken. But I was recording everything. Over the next few weeks, I became a master of deception, playing the role of the grieving, vulnerable heiress to perfection. I re-entered their lives, attending family dinners, offering hollow congratulations on their successes, and feigning forgiveness towards Liam. I was a wolf in sheep's clothing, gathering intelligence and planting seeds of doubt. I learned that my uncle had a gambling problem, a crippling addiction that had left him deeply in debt to some unsavory characters. My aunt, on the other hand, was obsessed with maintaining her social status, constantly vying for the approval of wealthy and influential people. And Liam, bless his naive heart, was torn between his loyalty to them and his lingering feelings for me. I exploited their weaknesses, playing them against each other, manipulating their fears and insecurities. I subtly suggested to my uncle that my aunt was plotting to take control of the company, and hinted to my aunt that my uncle was squandering their money on his gambling debts. I fed Liam a steady stream of guilt and remorse, reminding him of the pain he had caused me and the damage he had done to Evelyn's legacy. Each day, I meticulously documented their actions, gathering evidence of their fraud, their embezzlement, and their conspiracy. I consulted with a forensic accountant who helped me trace their hidden assets and uncover their illegal transactions. I hired a private investigator who discreetly monitored their activities and collected evidence of their shady dealings. It was a risky game, and I knew that one wrong move could expose me and ruin everything. There were close calls, moments when I thought they were onto me, when their eyes seemed to pierce through my facade. But I remained calm, collected, and focused on my objective. I smiled. I played their game. But I was documenting every single thing. The rival company they were targeting, StellarTech, was run by a brilliant but eccentric CEO named Marcus Thorne. I reached out to him anonymously, warning him of the impending sabotage. Initially, he was skeptical, dismissing my claims as the ramblings of a disgruntled former employee. But I persisted, providing him with concrete evidence of their plan. I explained how they intended to cripple his company's infrastructure, spread false rumors about his products, and poach his key employees. Eventually, I convinced him that I was telling the truth. Together, we devised a counter-strategy, a way to not only thwart their sabotage, but also expose their criminal activities to the authorities. Marcus, with his tech expertise, set up a secure server to house all the evidence I had collected, a digital fortress that would be impervious to their attempts to hack or delete it. He also put me in contact with a former federal agent, a cybersecurity expert named Sarah Chen, who helped me protect myself from their surveillance. Sarah taught me how to encrypt my communications, erase my digital footprint, and detect any attempts to hack my devices. She also advised me on how to handle potentially dangerous situations, warning me that my uncle and aunt were capable of anything. "They're cornered animals, Lucy," she said. "Don't underestimate them." The anticipation was growing, the sense that the final strike was imminent. I could almost taste the victory, the sweet satisfaction of seeing their empire crumble before their eyes. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I discovered that my uncle and aunt had been evading taxes for years, funneling millions of dollars into offshore accounts. This was the smoking gun I needed, the evidence that would not only destroy their company, but also land them in prison. I knew that the exact day they tried to end me, I would expose the truth. I waited patiently, biding my time, gathering every last shred of evidence. I consulted with my lawyer, who assured me that we had a watertight case. He prepared the legal documents, the affidavits, and the subpoenas that would be served upon my uncle, my aunt, and Liam. He also alerted the authorities, who were ready to launch a full-scale investigation into their criminal activities. The day arrived, bright and clear, filled with an almost unbearable sense of anticipation. My uncle and aunt had scheduled a press conference to announce their latest acquisition, a move that would solidify their position as industry leaders. It was the perfect opportunity to strike, to expose their fraud on a grand scale in front of the entire world. I took a deep breath, steeled my nerves, and prepared to unleash the truth. I knew that this was a turning point, a moment that would change my life forever. There was no turning back. The day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. The press conference was their stage, their moment to bask in the false adoration of the business world. I watched them on the monitor in Marcus's office, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. My uncle, ever the charismatic frontman, was regaling the audience with tales of their success, his voice dripping with insincerity. My aunt, standing beside him, radiated an icy confidence, her eyes scanning the crowd with a predatory gaze. They looked like they had already won. That's when Marcus gave me the signal. The digital fortress was locked and loaded. The evidence was ready to be unleashed. I took a deep breath and pressed the button, activating the program that would broadcast their dirty secrets to the world. Suddenly, the live feed of the press conference was interrupted by a series of shocking revelations. Forged documents, hidden accounts, and incriminating emails flashed across the screen, each one a nail in their coffin. The audience gasped, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. My uncle and aunt froze, their carefully constructed facade crumbling before their very eyes. Panic flickered in their eyes as they realized what was happening. They tried to regain control, to shut down the broadcast, but it was too late. The truth was out, raw and undeniable. I watched with a grim satisfaction as their world imploded, their reputations ruined, their careers destroyed. The authorities moved swiftly, descending upon the press conference like a swarm of locusts. My uncle and aunt were immediately taken into custody, their faces pale and drawn. Liam, who had been standing nervously in the wings, was also apprehended, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and regret. As they were led away in handcuffs, they turned to me, their eyes burning with hatred. But I simply smiled, a cold, unwavering smile that sent shivers down their spines. The news of their downfall spread like wildfire, dominating headlines and social media feeds. Their company's stock plummeted, their assets were frozen, and their carefully cultivated empire crumbled into dust. The world watched in astonishment as the truth about their corruption and greed was revealed. I received a flood of messages from friends, colleagues, and even complete strangers, all expressing their support and admiration. But amidst the outpouring of praise, there was one message that stood out. It was from Marcus Thorne, thanking me for my courage and my unwavering determination. He offered me a job at StellarTech, a chance to put my skills and my experience to good use. I accepted without hesitation. It was time for me to move on, to start a new chapter in my life. But before I could do that, there was one more thing I needed to take care of. One last loose end to tie up. I visited Liam in jail, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on his face. He looked broken, defeated, his spirit crushed by the weight of his actions. He begged for my forgiveness, promising to do whatever it took to make amends, but I remained unmoved. "You had your chance, Liam," I said, my voice cold and devoid of emotion. "You chose them over me. You betrayed Evelyn's legacy. Now you have to face the consequences." I handed him a file containing all the evidence I had gathered against him, evidence that would ensure he spent a long time behind bars. He stared at the file in disbelief, his eyes welling up with tears. "I'm sorry, Lucy," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry." But I simply turned and walked away, leaving him to wallow in his guilt and regret. As I left the jail, I felt a sense of closure, a feeling that I had finally avenged Evelyn's memory and reclaimed what was rightfully mine. But I knew that the scars of their betrayal would remain with me forever. They thought they had broken me. They thought I was defeated. But they were about to learn that revenge is a dish best served ice cold, and I was about to serve them a dish they would never forget. That night, I received an anonymous message, a cryptic warning that sent a chill down my spine. "They're not done with you, Lucy," the message read. "Be careful." I knew exactly who they were referring to. My uncle and aunt, even behind bars, were still capable of causing trouble. They had connections, resources, and a network of loyal followers who would stop at nothing to protect them. I contacted Sarah Chen, the cybersecurity expert, and shared the message with her. She immediately went into lockdown mode, reinforcing my security and monitoring my communications for any signs of suspicious activity. "They're desperate, Lucy," she said. "They know that you're the key to their downfall. They'll try anything to silence you." I knew she was right. I was a threat to their survival, and they would do whatever it took to eliminate me. But I wasn't afraid. I had come too far, sacrificed too much to back down now. I was ready for them. I was prepared for anything. A few days later, I received an invitation to a private meeting with a prominent investor, a man who had been a close associate of my uncle and aunt. He claimed that he had information about their illegal activities that he was willing to share with me. I was suspicious, but I decided to play along. I knew it was a trap, but I couldn't resist the opportunity to gather more evidence against them. I agreed to meet him at a secluded location on the outskirts of the city, a place where I knew I would be vulnerable. I informed Sarah of my plans, and she insisted on accompanying me, along with a team of armed security guards. We arrived at the designated location, a deserted warehouse that reeked of decay and neglect. The investor was waiting for us inside, his face hidden in the shadows. As I approached him, I noticed something strange, something that made my blood run cold. He was holding a weapon, and he wasn't alone. Suddenly, the warehouse doors slammed shut and a group of armed men emerged from the shadows surrounding us. It was an ambush. They had lured me into a trap, and there was no escape. The exact day they tried to end me. The exact day they tried to end me, I was ready. The warehouse, a cavernous tomb of forgotten dreams, echoed with the metallic click of weapons being armed. These weren't just goons, they were professionals, cold-eyed and ruthless, each movement precise and economical. My hand tightened around the small device in my pocket, a panic button linked directly to a private security firm Marcus had insisted I use. But I wasn't going to rely solely on rescue. Sarah, ever the strategist, had anticipated this. The armed security guards weren't just rent-a-cops. They were ex-military, hand-picked by Sarah herself, disguised in plain clothes. The moment the warehouse doors slammed shut, they transformed. A flashbang grenade detonated, blinding and disorienting our attackers. The air filled with the acrid smell of smoke and the screams of startled men. My guards moved with lethal efficiency, disarming and subduing the thugs with practiced ease. I focused on the investor, the architect of this deadly charade. He lunged at me, a crazed look in his eyes, the weapon in his hand glinting under the dim light. But before he could reach me, Sarah intervened, delivering a swift kick that sent him sprawling. She disarmed him and pinned him to the ground, her eyes blazing with righteous fury. The fight was brutal but swift. Within minutes, the warehouse was silent, save for the groans of the injured. The authorities arrived soon after, sirens wailing, lights flashing, illuminating the scene of carnage. The investor and his accomplices were taken into custody, their plan to silence me foiled. As I stood there, amidst the chaos, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had faced death, and I had emerged victorious. My uncle and aunt, desperate to retain their power, had made one fatal miscalculation. They underestimated me. They thought they could eliminate me, but they only succeeded in strengthening my resolve. News of the failed attempt on my life spread quickly, further damaging their already tarnished reputations. The public was outraged, demanding justice, calling for their heads. The authorities, under immense pressure, launched a full-scale investigation into their criminal empire, leaving no stone unturned. Their assets were seized, their accounts were frozen, and their accomplices were rounded up. They were completely isolated, abandoned by their friends, their colleagues, their allies. Their world had shrunk to the four walls of their prison cell. The trial was a spectacle, a media circus that captivated the world. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, meticulously gathered and irrefutably damning. The forged documents, the hidden accounts, the incriminating emails, all were laid bare for the jury to see. My uncle and aunt, once titans of industry, now sat hunched and defeated, their faces etched with shame and regret. They tried to defend themselves to deny the charges, but their lies were transparent, their excuses pathetic. The jury deliberated for only a few hours before returning a verdict of guilty on all counts. My uncle and aunt were sentenced to decades in prison, their lives effectively over. Liam, who had cooperated with the prosecution and provided valuable testimony, received a lighter sentence, but his reputation was ruined, his future uncertain. As the judge pronounced their sentences, I watched them, my heart filled with a mixture of pity and satisfaction. They had brought this upon themselves. They had chosen greed and power over loyalty and love, and they had paid the ultimate price. In the aftermath of the trial, I received a visit from Evelyn's old business partner, Mr. Davies. He was a kind, elderly man who had always been a mentor and a friend to Evelyn. He thanked me for avenging her memory, for exposing the truth, for bringing justice to those who had wronged her. He offered me a position on the board of directors of Evelyn's foundation, a chance to continue her legacy of philanthropy and service. I accepted without hesitation. It was time for me to move forward, to rebuild my life, to honor Evelyn's memory. I took the job at Stellartech, working alongside Marcus, developing cutting-edge technologies that would benefit humanity. I found fulfillment in my work, a sense of purpose that had been missing since Evelyn's passing. I surrounded myself with people I trusted, people who supported me, people who loved me. I learned to forgive, to let go of the past, to embrace the future. They lost everything. Their freedom, their reputation, their wealth, their power. They lost their family, their friends, their dignity. They lost everything that had ever mattered to them. And I just smiled. It wasn't a smile of triumph or gloating, but a smile of quiet satisfaction, a smile of closure. I had achieved my goal. I had avenged Evelyn's memory. I had brought justice to those who had wronged her, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more resilient. The world saw a villain get taken down. They saw a family destroyed, but I saw justice served. I saw Evelyn's legacy protected. I saw a future where good could triumph, even against the darkest odds. The sting of their betrayal never truly faded, but I carried it as a reminder of what I had overcome and what I was capable of. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary. It's a bitter pill that must be swallowed to heal the wounds of injustice. It's a fire that burns away the corruption and deceit, leaving behind a clean slate upon which to rebuild. It's a reckoning that restores balance to a world gone astray. It's not about hatred or spite, but about justice and accountability. It's about standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult, even when it's dangerous. It's about protecting the innocent and punishing the guilty. It's about ensuring that those who abuse their power are held responsible for their actions. It's about sending a message that no one is above the law, that no one can escape the consequences of their choices. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.